All right. Well, thanks everybody. Welcome to the BC launch of the Real Face of Men's Health Report. My name is Mitch Hermanson, and I am the Fundraising and Business Development Director at Movember Canada. I am going to be your host this evening. I'm also going to be the panel moderator. Basically, I'm saying by the end of tonight, you're probably going to be sick of me. But I promise you this, that everyone that comes up on the stage and speaking tonight is far more smarter than me. But we've got a really fun conversation tonight. And on behalf of Movember and the UBC Men's Health Research Program, I want to just say a big thank you for all joining us this evening, especially because it is a sunny day in July. And you could be out on a beach right now, you could be on a patio, you could be playing a round of chip and putt in Stanley Park, but you're here with us and me and my mustache, and I am very grateful that you're here, okay? And in all seriousness, I hope you're all very excited to be here because we certainly are to be launching something really special. This Real Face of Men's Health Report is something that is our boldest policy effort that we've ever done before. And we're going to have some great people up tonight. We're going to say a few words. We're going to have the panel discussion. But I do want to give a special shout out and acknowledge some people that are here tonight. I want to recognize some dignitaries and MPs that we have with us. We have the Honourable Mr. Talib Nur Mohammed, Member of Parliament for Vancouver Granville. We have Mr. Jake Sawatsky, Member of Parliament for New Westminster, Burnaby Malloyville. And we have Colette Trudeau, CEO of Métis Nations of British Columbia. And before we go any further, I also want to acknowledge that we're gathered here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nations. So again, thank you so much for being here, every single one of you. We have some really important people here. But I also want to give a special shout out to the Movember community, because I know a lot of you folks have participated in Movember, maybe fundraised, maybe grew a mustache before. And I just want to do a quick poll. How many of you have participated in Movember before, maybe fundraised? Wow, a lot of you. And I want to say a big shout out to you because everything we do at Movember is thanks to you. And we could not do this without you. This report could not have been created without you. You are the fuel for this Movember and men's health movement. And a huge thank you for everything you do for this cause. We really couldn't do it without you. All right. This report, that's what we're all here for this evening. And I'll be honest, it's a little long. And there's a good chance that none of you or all of you have read the 118 pages of this report. So just in case you didn't read it over your breakfast coffee this morning, I'm going to try to pull out a few of the key findings that we talked about in this report. And the spoiler alert on this is that some of the stats are hard truths, but they're important truths that we're talking about. And that is that in Canada, one of the biggest things that stood out for me is that men are dying too young. So nearly half of Canadian men, 44%, will not make it to the age of 75. So we're losing men far too young. And that translates to 70,000 premature deaths in 2023 alone. We know that suicide is one of the top causes of death for Canadian men, and that 75% of all suicides in Canada are by men. And those rates are even higher amongst Indigenous and underserved communities as well. I think what this report also shows is that the consequences of men's health expand beyond just men. So men's health doesn't just impact men, it impacts our families, caregivers, our communities, our workplaces, and even our economy. And we're going to dive into that today as well. And so a lot of these stats aren't the easiest to talk about, and I don't want to be a buzzkill. But I think they highlight the challenge that we have to face. But I think one of the things that I look at, and I do find quite encouraging about the report, is it also lays out not just the problem, but that there's a real opportunity for action, for us to make change. And because the truth is, when it comes to men's health, every single one of us has a man in our life that we care about. Maybe it's a dad, maybe it's a brother, maybe it's a friend. And this report helps us understand, why, they're not getting the care they need, who is being affected, and also where the responsibility is to change that. I see this report not just as a book with some stats, but it's a call to action. It's a challenge us to create change. And at Movember, we have this saying called change the face of men's health. A lot of you may be more familiar with that, and maybe you change your face in the month of November. But changing the face of men's health has always also been about changing our attitudes when it comes to men's health, getting guys to learn about the health risks that they face, to actually go to the doctor, to take action early. And when it comes to this report, changing the face of men's health also is about changing, the systems, changing the policies, and changing the conversation around men's health in this country. Because at the end of the day, this is all about giving more life and more memories with the men that we care about. It's allowing a dad to walk his daughter down the aisle. It's allowing a husband or partner to take their partner on that trip they always promised, or maybe see their grandson or granddaughter born. That's really, at the end of the day, what this is all about. And along the way, help build Healthcare Canada together. All right, so before we continue, I know I said a small land acknowledgement earlier, but I would love to welcome to the stage Alec Garon to come up. He's from the Musqueam Nation, and offer a traditional territory welcome.
Na siam na siya, tolnaka kunasquich, tenitanat Musqueam. Ait na squaloan, quans quats nala. Heit sepka de swallop quathami hui tanawel. Witlial te qualtol tana quinant. A meet sep quathuilam, tana naash, tatas, Musqueamat tamo. Tishwa amits tas hankaminam kan. Siatalitsan Haitruka. My friends and relatives, my ancestral name is Tolnaka, my English name is Alec Garon, and I'm from Musqueam, where I'm an elected councillor. Brings me good feelings to be here with you all today. A couple of reasons. The first is that my people have been the guardians of the mouth of the Fraser River since time immemorial. What that means is if people wanted to come into the territory, access the waterways, the resources, they had to first come through us. If they were coming with open hearts and open minds, a willingness to follow the laws of the land, we'd welcome them. One of my ancestors would have gone out onto the shores and shared words of welcome in Huntkaminam, not dissimilar to the ones I just shared with you now. It is a real honor and privilege to be able to do one small piece to continue that work. Second reason I'm happy to be here with you all is the same reason you're all here. I have a lot of thoughts going through my head right now, and I'm going to try to pluck a couple of them out. Something that's been really top of mind for me as a newly elected First Nations leader is that responsibility we have to future generations. Everything we do, everything that I benefit from now, and Musqueam is really well positioned right now. So are our relatives from Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh. It's all because of what past generations did for us. And it's so important that we continue that chain. And for me, I'm looking at a world where, to be honest, I'm setting up future generations for a lot of financial success. The thing that keeps sticking out in my mind is, if they don't live healthy lives with strong cultural identities, I failed them. That includes having a healthy, masculine figure in their life alongside feminine figures in their life. To give them that guidance, to be that role model. This is really near and dear to my heart because I lost my dad when I was 12. I've struggled with mental health issues my whole life, depression and anxiety. I've never shared this publicly before. In fact, I've only shared it with one person ever before, but as a young man, I struggled with suicidal thoughts quite a bit. So the work of this report, the work of the people who are here to talk to you today, it's so important. First Nations health outcomes are lower than the average. Lower than the average Canadian by quite a bit, and particularly for women. But equally as important is that need to make sure that men, particularly in my mind with mental health, have the support we need. So we don't talk about it enough. So thank you everybody for coming, for considering you've got so many opportunities on how you can spend your time this summer. You chose to be here tonight. So I want to thank each and every one of you. Thanks to all of you who are putting on this panel, who did this work, taking up more time than I should. So with that, I'll just say it's my great honor and privilege. On behalf of my ancestors, my elders, and my people, to welcome you to the unceded territory of the Huntkaminam speaking people of Musqueam. See you, Tolitson. Haichka.
Thank you, Alec, for that welcoming and grounding us in importance. And appreciate you sharing your story. That was really well said. It's now my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Benoit Antoine Bacon, President and Vice Chancellor of the University of British Columbia. Since joining UBC in 2003, Dr. Bacon has led UBC with a vision of innovation, impact, and connection to community. He's also a national advocate for open, honest conversations around mental health, substance use, work that deeply aligns with Movember's mission. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Benoit Antoine Bacon.
Does this one work? It does work. Okay, well, thanks, Mitch, and thanks, Alec, for getting us started in a good way and for sharing some of your struggles. Sometimes culturally, we fear that it will be seen as a sign of weakness when we speak about our struggles. It's the opposite. It's a sign of strength. Bonjour tout le monde, as they say in my hometown of Montreal. Good afternoon. Welcome to UBC Robson Square. Thank you for joining us today. I want to thank Movember for bringing us together. I was thinking maybe I should have shaved my beard and just kept the mustache. I'm really grateful for the opportunity to offer just a few words as we gather for the BC launch of this groundbreaking report, The Real Face of Men's Health 2025 Canadian Report. I'm on holidays, but I wanted to be here today. This is important. This is important because it brings long overdue attention to an issue that impacts so many and is too often overlooked. There's just too many men in our society that are struggling quietly, that maybe never speak about it. Whether it's mental health challenges, substance use, chronic conditions, and accessing the healthcare support that they need. And these are complex challenges, often misunderstood, sometimes reduced to stereotypes, when in fact they stem from a range of social and cultural and systemic challenges. And I'm part of that. I'm here with you today, not just as UBC president, but as someone who understands this issue on a personal level. I grew up in an unsafe and dysfunctional home that has consequences. I struggled for a long time with a form of PTSD and chronic depression, certainly with substance use. It took about 20 years before I found the strength to reach out and get the help that I needed. I also think about my dad, who died a long time ago now. Mitch, you mentioned that men died too young. He was mid-60s. He died from drinking, which was his way of dulling the pain of self-medicating, and it would have never crossed his mind that he could ask for help. That's just not the way things were back then. I was luckier. My own healing journey has taught me that healing is always possible, but that it's much more likely when you can speak openly, without stigma, without judgment, about the challenges that we face, and we all face. The important report that we're launching today, co-authored by UBC's own John Oliffe and Sinclair from the University of Manitoba, reminds us that there is much work to do. It sheds light on disparities that men, including very much Indigenous men and boys, experience in our health systems. It also provides a clear path forward, advocating for a national men's health strategy, such a meaningful step towards systemic change. Why focus on men? I would say, needless to say, that some of the biggest beneficiaries of improved men's health and mental health are the women and children that love them. UBC is very, very proud to support the leadership of Dr. Oliffe, who's been at the forefront of men's health research in Canada for more than 2 decades. John, thank you for your leadership. It means a lot. As many of you will know, Dr. Oliffe's men's health research program was established in 2003, and the Reducing Male Suicide Research Excellence Cluster that is based here at UBC have helped to shape international collaborations dedicated to improving men's health all over the world. At UBC, we're very, very committed to supporting the well-being of students, very much including that of young men through a range of services, a range of programs designed to improve access to care and to foster a sense of connection and belonging. We're about to open a brand new building on campus that we call Gateway Health, that will be a one-stop shop for all health and mental health services on campus. Will also include academic programming on the topic of health. I'm very, very excited about this. Everybody, I always say no one is to suffer in silence. No one is to suffer alone. Together we can build a future where men's health is discussed openly and compassionately so that men are more likely to get the help that they need and deserve. And today's event is such an opportunity to move from awareness to action, to create strategies that ensure better health outcomes, stronger communities, and brighter futures for everyone. So I want to thank everyone for being here today. I very much look forward to the panel. Thank you for your great leadership, your commitment to this vital issue. Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bacon, for sharing your personal story, your reflections about your dad. I think it's something that I hope we can all reflect on about this report, how men are dying too young. And I think we can all reflect on a man in our lives that maybe we lost too young or has had struggles with mental health or maybe detected cancer or a physical health concern too late. So thank you so much. All right. Now I'm honored to introduce Mr. Talib Nur Mohammed, Member of Parliament for Vancouver Granville. Please welcome Mr. Mohammed.
Well, thanks very much, everyone, for being here. Of course, I want to begin by acknowledging that we are here on the traditional unceded territory of the Musqueam, the Squamish, and the Tsleil-Waututh. And on occasions like this, that acknowledgement is important if we think about the impact and consequences of how we show up and how we don't show up. And if you haven't, you should read this report. It is sobering. You used the word, you didn't want to be a buzzkill, but this is something that everyone should read. Because in it are facts, but in it are also opportunities. And as a federal government, there's lots of learnings for us. And here I intend to take this back to our Minister of Health to share your recommendations in this report, this incredibly well-written report, because it matters. It matters that we take men's health seriously. Dr. Bacon mentioned that the beneficiaries of good men's health, better men's health, are not just men, but also women and the children that love them. And if we think about the consequences of not taking care of men's health, you know, everyone says, oh, you got to be a hero, you're a dad, you got to do this, you got to do that. Being a hero is being there. Being a hero is being around for your kids or for your family or your loved ones. It's not about suffering in silence. It's not about not getting the help that you need. It's not about pretending there isn't a problem. And we've all been through different elements of this as guys. And you know, politics is a tough sport, and we go through, you look at the stats of people in politics and our mental health and our physical health, and you know, they joke around about the weight that you gain in the first year after you've been elected or the stress that you have. That cuts across professions. It cuts across the way in which men deal with the challenges that we face. And so if you're a guy and you're in this room and you haven't read this report, you should, and you should share it with your friends, because the stats in here tell us a story about who we are and who we aren't. And I've had the chance now to go through it in probably more detail than I would have liked. And I will say that if we reflect on the decisions that we make every single day, what we cut out, what we compromise on, what we decide we're not going to do. I'll talk to a health professional tomorrow. I'll go to the doctor next week. It's only a minor chest pain. It's not a big deal. I've just gained a few pounds, doesn't matter. Maybe my blood sugar is high, maybe it's not. I'm feeling depressed, maybe it'll go away if I grab a drink. None of that adds up, none of it works. What works is actually taking care of ourselves. And taking care of ourselves is good not just for ourselves or our families, also good for society. Because the determinants around poor men's health have a massive, massive financial impact on an already overburdened healthcare system. Billions of dollars every year because of things that we could have prevented by just acting earlier. Billions of dollars. Billions of dollars that could go towards other life-saving things, just if we took the extra time to ask ourselves, are we doing okay? And so I would encourage all of you, in the context of the incredible work that Movember does in raising awareness, to do your part, not just in being aware, but encouraging your friends, your family, your neighbors, your coworkers, to take it a little bit more seriously, to take men's health a little bit more seriously. Because if we do, we'll be around to do more good, we'll be around to help out a little bit more, be around for our families, reduce the burden on society, but more importantly, we'll be able to live our best, most fulfilling lives for the families and the communities in which we live. Every November, we are reminded by the simple act of growing a mustache. In the case of some of us, people donate so that we won't grow the mustache. I mean, there's probably something to be said for that as well. But it shouldn't be something that happens in November and that we forget about. I think it's really important that you're releasing this report in July, right? Because it gives us a whole bunch of time to think about what actually November means when Movember rolls around. And I would say that on the part of the federal government, certainly there is more that we can do, and I think this report is a clear indicator of the things that we might consider as we think about building a healthier Canada. I know my colleague Jake and I are going to take this back and share with our colleagues the importance of the work that you're doing. But I would encourage all of you to become advocates for this work, not just raising money or growing a mustache during November. Both of those things are important. But educating people, sharing the important lessons that you have learned. I mean, your story is one that people need to know. The fact that you're here with us is an important story that people need to understand. This is a human story about each and every one of us. It's not just about stats. It's not just about big abstract numbers. It's about the people that we erase from our lives if they're not here, what that actually means, and the consequences on families and society. So thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for inviting us to be part of this. And thank you for pushing on something that society for years and years and years has not taken as seriously as it should. And hopefully with the work that you're doing, we will. Thank you.
All right. Thanks so much, Mr. Nur Mohammed. That was very well said, very eloquent indeed. Okay. So now that brings us to the heart of our evening, our panel discussion. So I would love to welcome the panelists to the stage, if they would like to hop on up and join me over here.
Sit out, whatever.
All right. Lovely. So I might just do a little quick introduction, and then we'll dive into the questions. So to my left, we have Dr. John Oliffe, co-author of the report and professor here at UBC, and founder of UBC Men's Health Research Program. Next to him, we have Niigaanwewidam, co-author, Anishinaabe writer, and professor of Indigenous Studies at the University of Manitoba. Welcome, and thanks for being here. Then we have Chris Ho, two-time testicular cancer survivor and mental health advocate. Thanks, Chris, for being here and sharing your story. Next, we have Aaron Purdie, executive director of HIM, which is the Health Initiative for Men here in BC. So thank you, Aaron, for being here. And that is a little mustache on the top lip, I see, so thanks for rocking that. And last, but certainly not least, is Catherine Corriveau, who is Movember Canada's Director of Policy and Advocacy. So thank you all for being here. All right, so maybe we'll dive into the questions. And Catherine, we'll start with you. So when I think of this report that we have here, it is a major step for Movember. And not just in research, but in how we advocate for men's health on a national level. And I think for a lot of our Movember supporters and community members here, They may know us for the mustache and raising money and funding programs, but they haven't seen us advocating at a national level before. So why did Movember launch this report now? And what are you hoping it will shift?
First of all, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here and for our speakers who started. I'm sorry I don't have a mustache. I tried really hard and failed. So I'll give you maybe an analogy that I think really shows why we're doing this policy and advocacy work here in Canada now. If you have a pond full of fish and all the fish in the pond are sick, at some point you have to stop treating each individual fish and look at the water and who's putting the water in the pond. And the policy and advocacy effort that we're going to be doing and that we've started as of last month is looking at that water and looking at the systems in place that are creating this critical challenge that we're facing here in Canada. You mentioned some of the stats. 75,000 men dying prematurely in a year is a lot of people, especially when it's due to preventable causes. Cancer, coronary heart disease, suicide, those are all things we understand and know how to treat and know how to prevent. And so we're here to think about how we change the infrastructure that's leading to those numbers. We've done this work. For those who don't know, Movember isn't just in Canada. It's in Australia and the UK and other markets as well. And in Australia and in the UK, we released a similar report and really just to show the scale of the problem and really the opportunities to move forward. And Canada really has an opportunity here to think of its role, and the Canadian government to think of its role in changing those systems. We need to raise awareness, which I think Movember is great at doing, and all of our community is really helpful in getting done. But really trying to identify not just the fact that the mustaches are fun, but that premature mortality death has an impact on men, on our societies, and our economy. And, you know, it's about changing behavior. It's about influencing the policy systems that are improving the outcomes for men. And it's about supporting a cultural change around what men's health is. So at the end of the day, when too many people are dying too young and we know how to fix it, we have to think about our role in that work. And this is why this report is here.
All right, thank you so much. I've never heard that fish analogy, but it really hits home. So thanks for sharing that one.
It's not mine. But
Okay. All right, I take back my comment. All right. So next, we're going to go to the co-authors of the report, so John and Niigaan. So you both brought a really unique perspective into this process, academically, culturally, and personally. And I imagine as you pulled this report together, it involved maybe some challenging truth, or maybe some unexpected findings. And so I wanted to ask you both individually, what stood out or surprised you most as you brought this report together?
Okay. All right. So bonjour de magraduk Niigaanwewidam de Digitakos Namago Shindo Demni Menwendam Omayayan. Bonjour Mishomasak Nakomasak Mijana Gijik Iban. Namiji Nibekwe. It's nice to be here. And I come from Treaty 1 territory, which is, for those of you that may not know where that is, that's basically the area that encompasses what's now the city of Winnipeg and most of southern Manitoba, and then of course our relatives from Treaty 2. So I come from Peguis First Nation, and I have connections with Maniquetogan and also Norway House Cree Nation. So all my different connections with that. And so the question is what was the most surprising part of the report? I guess the most surprising thing, if I were to really think about it, is that you asked the question, or that Movember's asking the question about Indigenous men. Because the reality is that this has been arguably the most undiagnosed, least considered, and oftentimes misunderstood epidemic of the country. The epidemic of Canada is that we continue to throw Indigenous men into jail. We continue to ignore the mental health crises that our people are facing, that oftentimes are hitting men very hard, which impacts everybody in families and communities and leadership and governance. Every single part of an Indigenous community goes through, is impacted by, it relates to the health of Indigenous men, nephews, sons, brothers, grandfathers, fathers. And so the fact that Movember is asking this question and that I was approached to contribute an element to this report is probably the most surprising to me, is that you wanted to know. Because the reality is that there's so many people who don't want to know this. They want to just continue. We have premiers who say the only solution to this is just to open up more jails and call that infrastructure. We have people within communities, sometimes Indigenous communities, who say that the whole problem is just men and we need to banish them and we need to punish them in some particular way, and whether we do that in different various circumstances online or publicly or whatever. And that none of that is working. Like, none of that is working. In fact, what it's doing is it's creating the epidemic, which has gone to the very first point of contact between Europeans and Indigenous peoples, from the imposition of the hypermasculine, the notions of Indigenous manhood and gender and identity, all of which were foreign to us and created toxic cycles of relationships we've now been 500 years in, has created an epidemic of problems in our community, which is seen most in child welfare, health, justice, and in the case of this report, families, nations, even the whole notion of the country itself. It's impacting everything. We just have to look to James Smith, the horrible tragedy at James Smith, the horrible tragedy that happens within jail systems or child welfare systems all across the prairies, more children removed than ever was before. And of course, probably the most prevalent issue, which is murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls in this country. All of that is the symptom of what we are creating in the problem, or what we continue to create as a problem, which is that we keep putting Indigenous men, putting Indigenous men into dangerous situations, also ignoring the problem in which, when they have trauma, coming out of those situations, and then not offering any solutions whatsoever other than punitive measures. And this report, what I hope, offers something other than that, which is to be I often say that jails solve nothing, but pancake breakfasts solve everything. And that's just a metaphor, of course, going back to metaphors, but that is what I hope that this report offers, which is a sense of a solution for those of us who are my brothers and my uncles and my father, my sons, my brothers, my nephews. All of us are struggling mightily, and we struggle all the time. We have issues that we constantly face, and to have somebody care to ask the question is very surprising, and it offers a kind of light. And so that's what I hope this report does.
Thank you, Niigaan. And yeah, this report would not be the same without your contribution, so thank you so much. John?
Yeah, just to say, for us, in putting the report together, it's weird, for the 20-some years we've been project to project and looked at different topics related to men's health, and we'd produce those. But this got us into that 35,000-foot view of what's working in the country and what's not working. It got us really close to social determinants of health in tangible ways. We thought about structural determinants of health as well, so we could see structures that we wanted to influence. So those opportunities you don't get every day as a researcher. So it was a wonderful surprise to be able to lift up and have a look, at what's working and what we can adjust and make changes to. I think the other thing, a surprise post writing this and it going out, has been the reception. We've had a lot of press. A lot of interest. People want to talk about the issues that are there. It's got some great moments empirically in this report that say things we haven't said before about caregiver burden. So there's some surprises there to help us think a little bit more creatively about gender relations and how solid impacts for men's health will benefit everybody. It's a nice tangible way. So we've got that piece in there, and we do. I've often said that Canada invented health promotion. I think it did, because we were quoting Ottawa Charter for the longest time, so it's good enough for me. So just to say that we've got a chapter that celebrates some of the best health promotion in this country, but we've got a challenge about sustaining some of those programs and building them, and I'd love to see Barb McMillan here from Men's Sheds as well, just to say an example of something on the ground that works for men, but we need to continue to build.
Awesome, thanks, John. And I was just curious, quick follow-up. When we got so many media attention to this, do you know why? Or what was it about the report, or was there a specific stat that you think?
I think people are interested.
Yeah.
I think people are interested in the context, and I think we may have, had a bit of a deficit model around men's health for a long time, and it may have been very much located in erectile dysfunction for a long time as well. So a very simplistic view of what is an entirely complex issue, and I think the report captures that. So when the press releases went out, the things that people grabbed hold of that wanted to talk about things, they were things around caregivers, they were things about this premature death and the causes of that, which we articulate in the report, which helped to create a conversation that's proactive. It's about moving it forward, and I think that's what garnered the interest.
I think if I could just add one thing, I don't know one person that doesn't realize this is an issue. I don't know one person who doesn't say, the challenge of my community is that we have absent uncles, fathers, grandfathers. Most of them are either in jail or working 5 jobs, or if for one reason or another are not in the home, sometimes for good reasons that they're not in the home. And so, but everybody can go, well, there's a problem here. Like, it's very evident that women are doing the disproportionate amount of child raising in Indigenous communities, as just an example. They're doing a disproportionate amount of supporting the not just child rearing, but also support of an entire community, doing all the heavy lifting. And there's also a problem in that men are the face of communities, and oftentimes not always the best face or the correct face, because it's actually the women doing all of the work. And the women who are the sisters, aunties, partners, cousins, they're doing all of the heavy lifting, but then the face of that with the media, or just sometimes just outward, is usually the face of an individual solitary male. Everybody recognizes there's a problem, but nobody really has thought about beyond that. And so what we're trying to do here is we're trying to come up with proactive solutions that suggest both that there isn't just a diagnosis of the problem. There are 100 reports that diagnose the problem. Like, if Indigenous peoples just alone, we've been studied to death. So all of that is evidence of all of these different factors, whether it be colonialism or whether it be poverty or whether it be all the different things. All of those are symptoms of what is ultimately a problem that we don't know how to fix. And that's what this report's trying to do. So everybody understands the problem, but this is we're trying to offer a solution.
Great job. All right, thank you both. All right, so we're gonna head over to Chris. So Chris, you're featured in the report. You tell your story, cancer survivor. And what I think, you bring something to the conversation that stats and policy can't fully capture, and that's lived experience. You went through cancer. And so your story has already impacted so many people. You and I have chatted before and been on a panel, and very inspiring. So maybe for those who are here that haven't heard it, in your own words, what made you want to share your story as part of this report, and how has that your journey kind of shaped your life today?
Yeah, thanks, Mitch. My cancer story starts in 2013. Was actually just newly engaged, and it was actually because of my partner who recommended I get a family doctor. That was kind of the first step. I didn't have a family doctor at all, and I was lucky to get one. And routine shower, living in Yaletown, just her and I, felt a lump in one of my testicles. And I thought, well, good thing that I have a family doctor and I should go check it out. And that led to my family doctor, to an ultrasound, to another referral. And during this time period, I went to what most guys probably go to, which is Dr. Google, and start understanding what this could be, right? Great thing, also a very terrible place to go. And eventually led me to a conversation of going to the doctor's office, and well, first my family doctor was Chinese, and I bring that into this story because there's an element of my background of being Asian, which was helpful. And then when I met my urologist, oncologist, who was also Asian, I remember walking to his office, and it was a quick hello. He's like, "Take your pants off." I'm like, "Okay." Did a quick examination, and I still remember to this day. He just said, "Oh, that's cancer, all right." And I literally fell to the ground, and he had to catch me, because as much as Dr. Google was saying this, you don't really prepare yourself for that moment. And I remember his face. He's probably said this 1,000 times in his life, but it was the first time that I've ever heard it. So that led to, I don't really know what he said after that. I knew I was sitting beside his booking clerk 10 minutes later, asking me what my schedule was like in 2 weeks for emergency surgery. And that obviously kind of set a tone of the next few weeks. I was engaged. I had to go home and talk to my partner about the news that I was brought. Had a successful surgery in the fall of that year. Got one removed. Was a great operation. Follow-up CT scan after that, because how often do we get CT scans? Revealed that I had a nastier tumor in my right adrenal gland. 10 centimeters. He said it was nasty. He said that your kidney's probably gonna have to leave, parts of your liver, and if you don't get this out, you're probably gonna die. And that was Christmas of 2013. Valentine's Day the year after, I had that right adrenal gland removed. I remember waking up, talking to the doctor, saying, "How's my kidney? How's my liver?" They said, "It's okay. We kept those. We just took your right adrenal gland out." And fast forward a couple months, that particular tumor turned out to be benign, which was great, because that was pretty nasty. I recovered. Fast forward, my cancer journey kind of takes an interesting pivot. 2016, I got a phone call from my dad. He tells me to come home. Said, "I have some news to present to you." I kind of knew something was wrong. I come home to my family home. He's staring into the wall. He starts crying, which is the first time I ever saw my dad cry. And he told me that he had stage 4 lung cancer. And he was undergoing treatment and chemo. And I was prepared for my journey, but I wasn't prepared for his journey. And, I braced for that. Came home that evening to talk to my wife, who knew something was up. And I shared the news with her that, "Hey, Dad's got stage 4. Doesn't look so good." And we embraced. And then shortly after that, she told me that she was pregnant immediately after, and had a pregnancy stick in her hand. So Elton John, Circle of Life, Lion King was in the background of my life at the time. We used that as kind of motivation for my dad for the next year and a half. He battled hard, all types of treatments, trials, and so forth. He did live long enough to meet his very first grandson, which is Caden Ho, our firstborn. And he did pass in 2018 through his journey. And a lot of motivations, a lot of shared memories with that, and a lot of learnings. But I thought my cancer story would end at that point. Unfortunately not. COVID, a month before COVID, January 2020, regular exams, as I would suspect. And then another ultrasound revealed that another lump came in with my remaining testicle that I had. So I went to UBC campus to get that testicle removed. Right before COVID, I remember being in the hospital, seeing this news of people coughing in China, which was very interesting. And before that, my wife and I decided, hey, we should probably take some sperm out just in case. We never know. We did. Had my surgery in 2020, recovered. I am on testosterone replacement. Haven't felt healthier. 2021, my brave, courageous wife said, hey, let's try this thing called IVF. It's very low risk, very, very expensive. Said, we will never know unless we try. And luckily, through her efforts and courageous, we were gifted our second son, Liam, through IVF. So now we have 2 boys that are 8 and 4 along the way. So in short, that's my journey today. I feel happy, healthy, and I've learned a lot of lessons along the way, and I don't regret a single thing that has ever transpired.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing, Chris. I think I've heard your story maybe 2 or 3 times now, and not gonna lie, I got a little, almost had to reach for the tissue box there, Chris. So thank you for sharing, and yeah, I'm glad to see you're doing well. Aaron, Mr. Mustache.
That's me.
All right. So with your work at HIM, you're on the front lines of supporting communities who are often left out of the traditional health conversation. So when you read this report, what kind of jumped out to you? And what still isn't really being talked about enough in your mind?
Yeah, thank you. I love men.
I really would, man. Sorry, I work with them, so yeah, that does need a Mikaz, thank you. You're probably hearing me because you love a man. I love them too. So, yeah, absolutely. I'm a queer man, a gay man. I'm partnered with a man. When I read the report, what resonated with me was how similar my experiences were. Surprise, surprise. Gay men exist under the umbrella of men's health. Absolutely, unquestionably. Um, and then I got sad because I wonder what would have happened if this work had been happening in the 80s and 90s. I wonder what would have happened to my ancestors, to my elders who died, trying desperately to fight for attention, for policy change, for research, for science, for all of it, because it was a massive outbreak of a disease that was killing everyone. My mother was a nurse in Toronto, and she said that this really artistic guy kept coming in, and and it was before I all knew what it was, and he just kept coming back to hospital and getting sicker and sicker and sicker. And he painted these little paintings for all the nurses because he was there so often, and she kept it all these years. And that to me is a lost legacy. So this work is so crucial that it's happening now. Absolutely crucial, because we do need to fight upstream. Our work at HIM is about going and making connections with gay men and making sure that their health literacy is high, that they have access to the opportunities, and we build a bridge between gay men and the locally available healthcare services, because we all want the same thing. We all want men to live full, healthy, happy lives. And so I am just so overjoyed to see this happening now, because then maybe I'll live longer and I can be an elder to generations coming up. It is absolutely, I think the thing that I would love us to talk about more is, I'll go really big and philosophical here, and I'm going to take from our amazing Indigenous landed holders in so-called Canada, is truth. We have to be better at being honest. Truth comes before anything else. We have to admit that we don't know stuff, that we need help, that we have thoughts inside of ourselves that are dark and scary, that we don't know the answer to all the questions. Truth is vital. There are so many lies that men are playing with online on social media. There are so many lies flying around out there. What we need to focus on and talk about more is what's true. And the best thing I think about empirical research is that it makes it inarguable in large part. You know, Yarvoli can't question too much if 1,300 people have been surveyed and asked a single question. It's a strong sample to tell us some important information. So truth, I think that's what we need to talk about more. Thank you.
Great answer. I do like that a lot, the truth. Yeah, you're not wrong about the truth. All right, so we do have a slide up here. So if you do have questions for the panel, you can head to slido.com and put in the event code Men's Health. How fitting. And you can submit your question. And so we'll get to those here shortly. going to carry on with Niigaan and Chris. So one of the hardest truths in this report is just how long men tend to wait before getting help. We're often kind of told that narrative of men, tough it up, suck it up, be a man. You know, Chris, your dad found out he had cancer at stage 4. The report shows that 65% of men delay seeking care, and that it even showed that 1 in 10 will wait 2 years before they go to the doctors for something that's seriously hindering them. And I'm not even just saying this. This week, a guy in my elevator in my apartment, I was talking to him. He lives on my floor, and I said, "How are you doing?" He said, "I just got out of the hospital. I was there for 6 days." And I said, "What? What happened?" It turns out he's had long COVID, and he's had a cough, persistent, for 2 years. And it almost killed him this week, just because he didn't take action and go when he noticed something was different. And he's an exact example of this stat, of men just delaying action when it comes to their health. So men are still waiting too long, is basically what this report does tell us. So what do we need to change in order to normalize early help seeking with men and routine care?
I think for me and for others, I think is giving the permission to make this top of mind. Like I was thinking on the ride here, like no one questions whether we should see the dentist every 6-9 months, right? That's just part, it's ingrained in the work that we do, ingrained in the habits that we build. So, you know, how can we build those habits by seeing the doctor as part of those habits? And I think part of it is either providing permission or almost saying in a way where it's part of being cool almost, right? Like making it part of our day-to-day, that as much of a habit as going to the dentist or going to the gym, and making it part of our day-to-day. And I think if we do that and talk about it publicly, I think all of us have an ability to talk about how we are going to the doctors when something's off, and that's okay, and that's actually more the norm versus waiting 2 years to check on a particular cough. So the more conversations we have and normalize this over repetition, I think could help.
I train paramedics, police officers, government people. It's like a large segment, a significant enough portion of my life where I say the same anecdote over and over and over again. When you show up, let's say you're a paramedic, won't even choose police officer, but absolutely for police officer, same could be said about government person in a suit. But let's say paramedic, like if you go to a community, an Indigenous community, and you show up and you're in your outfit, your uniform, you pull up with an ambulance to somebody's house, almost nobody thinks you're there to help them. Like, that's absurd. What they think is what do I have to hide from you? What do I have to not tell you? And then also, I may have an emergent situation, so I may need your immediate help on this health issue, but I don't want you to stay for very long. In fact, I want you to get out of here as quick as possible, because I don't want you to fill a report on the condition of my home, on the way in which, what is in my cupboards or my fridge, what is my financial situation, or what is it that I've dealt with 20 minutes before you got there. My father, who was a very prominent Indigenous person in Manitoba, it's kind of like everybody knows who he is. And so, and for those of you that don't know, my father was of the late Senator Murray Sinclair. So, wonderful, amazing, brilliant man. Not perfect by any means, but certainly was a very tough guy. And so his gallbladder basically exploded inside of his body. And for months and months, he just called it indigestion. But basically every meal that he had, he would writhe on the couch for half an hour. And one day he happened to have this very spicy stew that my mother made. And that was the end of it, right? So we went to the emergency room. I got the call, Dad's gone to hospital, meet us at the ER. I drive over there, and Dad, the only comfortable position that Dad's in the ER is lying on the floor, because He can't even lie on the bed because it's just too painful. It's actually too soft. He needs something firm to be able to support this side of him because his gallbladder has mummified in his body as it's exploded 6 months ago. My point of it is that the doctor walks in, he sees this very large Indigenous man on the floor, and his first words, literally, first words, "How many drinks have you had today, sir?" Like, not a hello, not a, and my example was, my response to that was, what the rhymes with truck? And so I probably didn't act proactively in that scenario either, although I think I could be forgiven. His actions are unforgivable. But he has been taught by somebody, and taught by a university, and taught by a family, and taught by a community, and taught by movies, and taught by magazines, and nobody reads magazines anymore, but you know what I mean. Like, he's been taught by an entire system in society that Indigenous peoples are to blame for their own health outcomes. Why the heck would we ever go to a hospital? It's the worst possible place that you can go. It is the most dangerous place that you can go. Why would you ever in any way talk to a doctor unless it was your last resort? Because the doctor is going to judge you, the doctor is going to sterilize you, the doctor is going to do things without your consent, and the doctor is going to ask, "How many drinks have you had today, sir?" My dad hasn't drank for, I don't even know, since I was a kid. And that's my point. Historical mistrust is real, so we have to train, we have to engage, we have to stand up for what is ultimately a deep underbelly of racism within every institution in the country, but health being probably the worst, followed by child welfare and justice as being kind of tied for the trifecta of the biggest problems and the biggest violences against Indigenous peoples. And then, of course, we also have to create some situations of safety. And that's where I think partners come in, because my dad would have never went to the hospital if it wasn't for my mother, who said, "This is the time. You're not going to ride on the couch tonight, Murray." And having those systems and supports in place. And so what does that really mean? I'm not just talking about partners, families, but obviously safe situations. What I'm actually talking about is healthy cultural communities. And that means revitalizing language, revitalizing systems of support, revitalizing traditional institutions like our brother spoke about earlier tonight. If we don't have those traditional institutions, then there's no reason to live other than to live. So.
Thank you both. All right, so we're going to go to Aaron and John now. You guys can tag team this one. So we've known for years that suicide is a men's health crisis. In Canada, 75% of all suicides are by men. It's the second leading cause of death for men 15 to 45. Men, for many men, talking about emotional pain feels like a weakness. We know this. Why is it still such a difficult conversation to have? And what actually works to help break the silence around suicide?
I'll shoot big again, and then John can get really specific, and it'll be much smarter. We've actually already heard it alluded to in this room several times today. I actually think a huge part of it is misogyny. I actually think that when I was at Pasquale, one of my friends wanted to get on birth control. And she went to the clinic, somehow talked to the doctor, got declined. Then she was upset, came back. We were hanging out at a Taylor cafeteria. She asked the other girls what was going on and why did this happen? And they all had this conversation. And they said, "Here's my experience, and I heard this, and I heard this, and I read this, and I read this. You need to go back to the doctor and say this, this, and this." And it was remarkable. And I've been thinking about that experience since. I very much think that this notion of masculinity, this kind of, and even amongst gay men, there is a distaste for women, and it's terrible. And every woman in this room knows what I'm talking about. That there is this general overarching sense of misogyny that really bogs men down. So I've heard several times in this room already about a woman intervening and supporting a man. I think that a big part of it is that we really have to keep working on the masculinities and the ways we engage with gender and really start learning from women, trans women, feminine people, trans men, and learning about all from the people who have had to advocate for themselves and take care of themselves for years. I really think that the part of the reason that it's hard to talk about is just because that misogyny will inside those guys makes all sorts of nasty sounds. I'm also a therapist, so I get to talk to people about what's in their heads, what their thoughts are like. Feelings is a part of it. I'm a narrative therapist. We do more with thoughts, constructs, stories in our heads, and the drivers behind those stories. And so often when I'm working with gay men, it ends up coming down to a misogynistic narrative about what is masculine and what is not. It is not masculine to say that you need help. It is not masculine to do X, Y, Z. It is, and it's reinforced online. You see it all the time in these disgusting online communities that are getting guys to like stare at the sun every day and not wear sunscreen. It's absolutely absurd. The kind of counter messaging that's happening online that is fueled by this attempt at obtaining some kind of masculinity and something. So I just really wish for us to all, in a way, get in touch with our feminine side, learn from our sisters and mothers and aunts, and talk. But I do think that the barrier I really think that a big part of it is misogyny, and it's very, very true for gay men. Very afraid of being vulnerable. Very afraid of what will happen if I do say something. What if I get a no? I don't know what to do with a no because I'm a guy. I've never learned. I've never gotten a no before. In a way, there's a privilege factor that's at play as well. I have learned from women and trans people and two-spirit people how to advocate for my health.
I think, it's interesting. It's a hard topic to talk about. Like, it's so downstream and it's so dire and it's dour, So I don't think suicide is very easy to talk about at all. And even when we write into the report, 3 times more likely to be a male than a female, it's the magnitude of the problem, the amplification of the problem. What we tried to do in the report was get upstream to offer some ideas about the things that might, load the risk, if you like, for male suicide. And those things, were in and around substance use, relationship breakdown, and depression. And I think the answers, or some of the answers in terms of getting the conversation, is that we can get conversations more readily about those upstream issues with the goal of intervening, for want of a better term, that we might be able to smooth some of those waters so as we weren't on a pathway towards self-harm and suicide. So again, I think we're getting conversations about substance use. I often talk about non-alcoholic beer now and the rise of that as with younger men, but we don't know if they're into other substances. We suggest they probably are, but it's trying to sort of work around and think about substance use in ways in which it changes over time. To get a handle on that and to start to do some harm reduction. Relationship breakdown is a great report by Michael Wilson this week that's released. It shows uncategorically that it's a major, major issue and risk factor for suicide. So we need better relationships. We also need to be able to help guys through what is a massive transition, whether it be separation, divorce, or however that goes. And I think depression too, the work of Simon Rice and, around how guys show up differently oftentimes with depression symptoms or depressive symptoms, especially early on, agitation, over-involvement, sports and work, risk-taking, those sorts of things, substance use, self-medicating. If we're cued to those things, I think we can get upstream, and maybe the conversation would be about suicide prevention, rather than the direness of saying, oh, well, guys are dying at 3 times the rate of women by suicide.
Thank you both. Suicide, not an easy topic to talk about, very complex, very rarely caused by a single reason or factor. One of my reflections over the years has been us guys, haven't been given the permission. We're told to suck it up, be a man, that type of narrative. We haven't had the practice as a result. So when we go through something tough, we don't reach out. We suffer in silence a lot of the time. And then the other one I think is role models. So very rarely do we actually see men modeling what that vulnerability can look like. And I do think that is something that is changing slowly but surely. Panels like this, conversations like this, Movember, all the supporters out here that, 10 years ago when I started working at Movember, I would get emails from Movember supporters about, they're asking for money, but they're sharing about, their prostate cancer journey. There's nothing about mental health. And then probably, 5, 6, 7 years ago, I start getting hit up by guys, in banks downtown Toronto about mental health and blasting their whole network about mental health and importance. And then, hey, if you're ever going through a tough time, let me know. So slowly but surely, I think we are getting there, role modeling, permission, more practice from guys. So I think that's all positive. All right, we're going to ask one more question, and then we're going to go to the audience questions. So this one's for Kath and Chris. So the report makes it pretty clear that poor men's health doesn't just impact men. It sends a ripple across families and communities and workplaces. And it's a broader picture that we didn't often talk about. Certainly in Movember, we didn't often talk about it, but this report kind of lays it really clear. So Kath, maybe we'll start with you, and then Chris will come with your personal perspective after. But Kath, can you walk us through what some of those ripple effects look like and what the full impact of poor men's health really is for Canada?
Well, I think you said it. We didn't used to have these conversations, and we didn't used to have the data to really understand a problem. And I think we all sort of feel is happening. Part of the reason we had this report, and just a little caveat, is to really demonstrate that there is a ripple effect that is impacting not just men. One of the big surprises from this report for me when I read it for the first time was that poor men's health costs Canadian taxpayers $12.4 billion in 1 year. That's a big number. You're probably like, what could I do with $12.4 billion? Let me tell you, you could run 12 major hospitals for a year in this country. Full operations. When we think about men's health, one of the questions I get, especially as a woman, is like, well, do we really need to be investing more money in men? Yes, because the money we are losing is money that we could be investing in healthier men, in healthier women, in healthier everyone. And so there's that number. There's the fact that there's a lost workforce, productivity. We want to build big projects in this country. We want to have significant sort of infrastructural accomplishments. That's great, but we can't do it without a workforce. But we also can't do it without the community of caregivers who take care of the men. Caregivers tend to overwhelmingly be women, and they're having to not show up to work, take vacation days, forego their own sort of professional opportunities. They're having to not see their friends and families because they're having to do that caregiving at home. There's a real impact on caregivers as well. 66% of them report having worse mental health outcomes out of being caregivers, and 50% of them report having worse financial and physical health outcomes. So it's not just men, it's everyone. And I think I can speak to for everyone in this room, we have all either been directly impacted by it or know someone who has. And I think I'm not going to go and repeat all the stories and the data that we've already discussed, but I think a lot of it is due to the fact that there's a lack of health literacy, both in terms of the men themselves, but also our practitioners of healthcare, the doctors who don't necessarily know what to ask or who are potentially dismissing the needs of men. And there's the fact that men might show up to seek care, and then they'll get a care that isn't appropriate to their needs, and so they're never going to show up again, or they may not only show up when it's too late. So then something that was a routine checkup is now critical, and that costs a lot of money, and it costs a lot of time and energy and dedication from our communities. So the report really goes into these numbers, and I think that we have to think critically about what it is that we want for the future of this country. If you don't care about health, care about the economy, or care about your sister, your mother, your cousin, your community who's having to really suffer the impact of poor men's health.
Well said, Chris.
Yeah, I think about my experience and thinking about my fiance taking care of me. You talked about ripple effects and seeing the impact that it had on her to carry on. She owned a small business at the time, and having to feel the gravity of the situation that I was in, but also for her to, you know, show that strength and to take care of me. At the moment, I didn't realize it, but in retrospect, you see how strong they have to be. And you talk about mental health as well as physical health, and that's done in silence as well. So there's a big ripple effect on that. And then even for my dad, so being on the other side of it, being a caregiver for him during his experience, you see firsthand as well of what the caregiver goes through. So I think the caregiver individual, the attention for them isn't highlighted as much, because when someone is sick, like myself, all the attention goes to that person. How are you doing? How can I help? You know, what's it like? And the attention doesn't go so far to the caregiver, who needs to be strong in that moment. But where's the help for that caregiver? How are they releasing? How are they having those conversations? Who's going to support them? And that ripple effect just goes across all families.
Great. Thanks for that. Okay, so we're going to go to questions from the audience now. And Calvin, thank you for, I got the text, so I got some questions here. So the number one is, what does the implementation of a national men's health strategy look like? That is something that's referred into the report. So I feel like, Kath, maybe you can kick us off.
Being put in the hot seat right away. Look, Canada has never done this before. So the first step of a national men's health strategy in Canada, which is our big ask with this report, is to have the conversation, is to start saying, look, we have this problem. We haven't really talked about it in such a comprehensive and clear way before. Let's have these conversations and see what different stakeholders in this space can do to make sure that we're equipping our men and their communities with the right health literacy tools and capacity, that we are investing in research, because Movember and UBC did some great work with this report, but there's more to do, and we can't be the only ones doing this work. So the role of government and our sort of cross-sectoral stakeholders in this space to really play a part in that research. Making sure that our healthcare practitioners are equipped with the tools and training so that they're able to respond to the unique needs of men, and ensuring that whatever we implement is responsive to the needs of the different communities within the country as well. Because if you're in downtown Toronto, your reality is very different than if you live in a rural part of northern Alberta. The access to care, the socio-cultural realities are very different. If you're from an Indigenous community, as Niigaan so clearly pointed out, the access to care and their experiences of care are very different. And so ensuring that we're able to develop and think about locally relevant programs is going to be important. But I would say first step is having a conversation, and we're going to be doing that with government, both federally and provincially, to ensure that we're really implementing a pathway for this conversation to become sort of policy solutions that really respond to the unique needs of men in this country.
Can I speak to this one too?
All right. Yeah, please do.
The Public Health Agency of Canada, I really feel should take this on. There's the Public Health Agency of Canada is an organization that isn't perfect. Nothing's perfect. It would be great to see at some point in this process, after the conversations have been had and there has been some direction set, to see what it would look like if communities were given the ability to enact these things. Public Health Agency of Canada has a fund called, for example, the Community Action Fund, which funds community organizations across the country to do different initiatives in sex work support, HIV intervention, HIV prevention. And they made decisions to actually say, no, we're going to switch to prevention for HIV. And it's made a huge difference. Infection rates are dropping. there's surges and changes, it's absolutely true. But the fact of the matter is that I do think that they're handing it back to, at some point, to community to enact it would be one of the most brilliant strategies that they could do. It isn't actually overly costly to give community organizations money. We can do more than a lot of federal and government-controlled, sorry, y'all's policies, do they go too slow? Sorry. Like, communities can move faster. And we can begin implementing these policies and these principles faster and for less money. And will impact more people, and it'll be peer-led. I would love to see that as part of the framework moving forward, because we've seen it. And please do, if you want to look at an interesting framework, look at Canada's framework around HIV prevention. You could use the same techniques. It would be great. There's lots of interesting things that we've been doing in HIV by setting targets year by year. 90, 90, 90 was the last one. 95, 95, 95, meaning that 95% of guys need to know their status. There's lots of things that we can take, and there are frameworks that already exist.
So true. Yeah, I think learning from successes, learning from past successes is a great way to go about it. And I think in the report, it also highlights how when you look at all the advanced economies across the world, Canada, in terms of expected life expectancy for men, Canada ranks 19th. So we're behind countries like Australia, New Zealand, Ireland, France, Korea, and they have policies that we could learn from as well. And we don't need to reinvent the wheel with this here in Canada, so we can take the learnings from elsewhere as well. Okay, I want to ask perhaps one final question. I want to be conscious of time as well. And so the question is, if you could implement one thing to have a substantial change in reducing early mortality rates for men in Canada, what would it be?
Okay, I'll go. School-based education programs. Like, starting really early, like start at 12 years old. Have men coming in teaching young boys about things. Get them ready. Teach them. Talk about it. Breach the conversation early and do it. Have a man do it so that they can see that role model happening.
I may be repeating myself a little bit, but I think it's simple. We've had a dedicated national strategy for women in this country since 1999. It is not perfect. I am a woman. Sometimes I wish it was better. But I think we need the same thing for men. We need to be recognizing men have unique needs. We will take a gender-responsive approach to these issues that impact everyone, but that men really have specific needs around. And we're going to not only recognize that, but commit to making sure that our programs and our investments and our frameworks are adapted to that gender-responsive framework.
So obviously support both of those points, especially the education part. I'm going to say this blanket term that is overused and very hegemonic and very vague, but I'll articulate what I mean in just a minute. But I'll say land-based education, and here's why. The biggest gutting of our communities has been of Indigenous communities has been initiation ceremonies, and it's where I read about this in the report that the most substantial and important moment for a young Anishinaabe Inine is learning how to make a fire, and because it teaches everything about the power of your body. It teaches everything about mentorship and trust, but trust of yourself probably first and foremost, but trust of also your cousins, your brothers, your sisters, your cousins, your aunts and uncles who are mentoring you, and then of course your grandparents who are also sort of overseeing you, and then the fire itself is the Ishkade, is the grandparent. And so you are fostering and building a safe space for your grandparent, but then that is a nurturing, warm space for others to be able to sit around. So if you haven't noticed, I am not really talking about fire now, am I? I'm talking about a home, I'm talking about a family, I'm talking about a community, I'm talking about laws and governance, I'm talking about everything necessary to be able to create autonomy, sovereignty, and independent both person, but then also community in relation with all others, like with humans and non-humans even. And so land-based learning, the fire ceremony, which I write about in the book, is just a sort of an example of what I will say to be the most critical element, the thing that have been gutted the most, which is that we've somehow bought into the idea or been forced to believe the idea that education in this country is a top-down approach in concrete boxes as far away from the land as possible, taught by people who are not in any way related to you, that's somehow going to save us in some way. That is the most antithetical, anti-Indigenous idea that could possibly exist. That education comes from learning from the 99% teacher, the beings who teach you the most, which is those that encompass that we are immersed in, which is the land, the water, the sky, the directions, the wind. That's where we need to learn who we fundamentally are, and that's where our teachings will always reside. It will not reside in concrete boxes as far away from the land as possible, getting 15 minutes of recess.
I think that one of the interesting things of putting that report together was, it's such a big country and there's such a lot going on and there's no real coordination around it. So I was ringing different folks to try and understand, how their part of the world is and some of the programs that they had going. And it was really enlightening. So, I in part, to what Kath has mentioned, that idea of building something where we've got a synergy or an ability to communicate, to reduce, effort, but to increase, collaboration, to learn from each other, because there's some really good things going on across this country that we need that are transplantable, in many ways, and we can learn a lot from each other. An initiative that UBC have been running, and we're all in town this week for the Reducing Male Suicide Research Cluster, it was about reducing the duplication of effort and going up and competing against each other. It was actually about building some synergies. And I would love to think that we could build across the country in a way where we were communicating what was working and what was not working, so we could make adjustments. And so there could actually be a critical mass and we galvanise the field, because it's been split for a very long time, or siloed because we just don't know what each other's doing. So it would be lovely to build something that had some synergies. Yeah.
All right, so some great responses. We got national strategy, peer-led, land-based programs, building some synergies, all sound like some great things. I'm just looking at the time, and I'm recognizing that we are a little bit over time where we wanted to be right now. So I think we'll wrap up the panel section of our chat now. And let's give a round of applause for our amazing panelists for the responses for being here tonight. And I'll invite you guys to go sit back down, and we're not quite done yet, folks. So we do have a kind of a big deal announcement. And so we're going to be inviting to the stage now Movember's Global Director of Indigenous Programs, Sonia Prevost-Durbecker, and she has a few things that she wants to share with you folks. Welcome, Sonia.
I'm here to tell you a couple of things. I want to start with a little bit of a story. This is where we've come from. I've been with Movember for 8 years, and in that time, I've witnessed communities just develop and flourish, seizing the opportunity to support social and emotional well-being for our men, and being the change they want to be. So I want to take you very quickly, because I don't have much time, on this journey to share with you what that looks like across this country. Our portfolio, as was mentioned, is in New Zealand, Australia, the US and in Canada, and I'll be focusing primarily on Canada. As was also mentioned, men don't live in bubbles, and in particular, Indigenous guys, because they're very connected. We're connected to our land, our community, our treaty, our people, our nations, right? So what that has meant is, in terms of Indigenous men's programming, we have taken an approach that, well, we will be measuring specifically men's social and emotional well-being based on the various programs that we may be supporting implementation and overseeing. We recognize that that offshoot may also support programming for youth, families, etc., right? That still means that men's only spaces in programming is respected and protected, but it opens it up for larger, broader community need. So let's take a look at what that has looked like in the past. I think I need to say one thing that I'm really proud of about in the Indigenous portfolio and Movember in particular is we've not been afraid to go where no one else wanted to go. We've not been afraid to go where the data and the stats were dire. The Indigenous portfolio lives within the mental health space because that is where our men die first. They die of suicide more than anything else, which is a tragic statement, which is a really tragic statement. But this is going to actually be a bit of a feel-good, hopefully. Of course, this is where all of our communities live, in very rural, often, and remote places. And over the past years, we've been providing really innovative, I believe, programming. So, no, sorry, back.
I just want to say the Ulu boy there, with the Ulu knife, that guy's in Arviat. And that program started off with a youth program of young hunters that moved into an elders group was helping youth reclaim cultural knowledge. Then the elders program started up where they started a radio station, Elder Talk, where guys could call in and get elder advice. That transferred to a youth program, again, that started to work with disengaged Indigenous guys up in Purdie, a very, very remote part on the Hudson. You could see how their programming was all kinds of land-based stuff, and that's a group of whale that they had just taught. Back over at the very end there, that's a group of unhoused men on the streets of Winnipeg. One of the reasons why started several of these programs is we saw an inordinate amount of death in our cities with Indigenous guys that would be flown in from the north, go to treatment, blow out of treatment in 2 weeks, land on the streets and die there, addicted to even worse drugs than they had gone to seek treatment around. So you'll see there's a theme in lots of our programming. That group has done amazing work through Aboriginal health and wellness, reaching what I would say is the hardest to reach population in the globe. It is a group that is always rejected, never finds a sense of belonging, has often no cultural understanding of who they are, and really has no idea of the level of resilience that they walk with. And this group has helped them form that understanding of themselves. And each one of those guys eventually was hooked up and is regularly attending with a medical practitioner in the inner city of Winnipeg. Truly amazing. The group down at the bottom, that's a group of men that have been engaged with child and family services. They may or may not have custody or access to their kids. Some of them do, some of them don't. They get together as dads or as parents wanting to be dads, talking about healing relationship, how to be a good father, how to stand up and represent, where our Indigenous values and teachings land in all of that. All of this, there's a theme, right? Cultural reclamation, standing up and feeling good in your own skin, recognizing that you are not judged just by the mistake you have made at one point in your life, but the strengths and the resiliency and the history that you walk in. And the last slide down there, holding the moose, is a warrior caregiver program in Churchill. This is just a smattering, but this is a collective impact integrated service delivery project that we initially started with multiple systems all coming together to build a plan for a small community in change. This guy was a participant who knew how to hunt, took the whole group out hunting, bagged their first moose, became a leader in his own right, and is now moving into the next phase of broadening that program where we're going to be not just doing land-based support, not just doing cultural reclamation, not just having 4 detox beds, advocating for a nurse practitioner with a healthcare background and a mental health person in a remote area, but developing a regional youth council, developing family programming, um, developing relationship programming with 5 of the neighboring reserves or First Nation communities, including York Factory, where there'll be a satellite base of land-based and culture programming so that when guys go up to Churchill to detox in those 4-day treatment detox beds, then go into cultural programming, they can get their families up there too, live in a duplex that's beside our Churchill Wellness Center that we created with the community, and see a trajectory of change in their lives. So next slide. So we have announced already globally 700K per year projects for 5 years in all 4 markets, or sorry, in 3 out of 4 markets. 3-year projects that are innovation projects, as well as Reclaiming Our Voice, which is really talking about the redefining who we are and dispelling that and developing the knowledge transfer network. I just throw those pictures in, but the point has already been made that this impacts whole community. That's the elder from the elders group in Purdie trying to teach a young boy, and you really should be trying traditional food. And these are the elders preparing that food for the feast for whole community. Next slide. So our investment, if that story has a misspell, $59.9 million. We don't just, and I want to thank that panel, but at the writers of that amazing report. We don't just write amazing reports. We put our money where our mouth is. So I'm here today to announce part of that funding is innovation projects, 4.2. One of them's in Hawaii. It's called K-Buy. Work with inner city youth doing bikes as a soft intake with a variety of health sport promotion work to give. Amazing programming, guys. Amazing. You've got to look it up. Guys in jail in 5 penitentiaries in Kingston make things to give back to communities, sometimes communities that they come from. And I'm going to quote from the very first evaluation. I didn't have a bed as a kid, so it makes me feel really good to be evicted of that. Right? The reciprocity and the opportunity to reclaim themselves outside of the mistakes they made is so important. Calling Our Spirit 4 in Montana, very innovative, high risk community, high need, high levels of drug addiction in it. Equine therapy, addictions and traditional support, land-based, all of Ante, the Friendship Center near Todd and Yare, doing a land-based programming, and Shinway, the Young Men's Gathering Place in Wiki or with Pamakong, working with disengaged youth. All of this is blanketed by culture, and all of it is building on the strengths that are inherent in our community. So I'm pleased to announce that commitment with the acknowledgement that there'll be many more coming in the new year. Get you, Mikoche.
Thank you, Sonia. Thank you all for coming. I will be brief. This is the lengthy report It's quite wordy, but it's full of good stuff. If you have a chance, please go online, try to see what that means for you. But what I'm here to do and what we're here to do here as a community is to really think about how we can invest in a Canadian-made national men's health strategy so that we make sure that we're preventing thousands of unnecessary deaths in Canada, that we're improving the health outcomes for men, and that we're easing economic and caregiving burdens and impacts on families and our communities. We do that, I said it before, by strengthening our health literacy and by strengthening our health promotion. We equip our health care workers with better tools and training to engage the men when they do show up. We advance research and data collection, and we scale gender-informed programs across Canada. Canada has a really, really great opportunity here. We know what we have to do. We have all the solutions. We just have to put the systems in place to do it. So thank you for being here. Think about your role in that conversation. I also want to thank Mitch. A big round of applause for our moderator in-house. To all of our dignitaries who joined us today, it means a lot that you came. To everyone here who chose to not go in what I've been hearing all week of the E. coli water of this city and came here. It was a safer place here. We have some food and some refreshments just outside. Thank you for being here, and we hope to see you in November with mustaches, but all year long. We're here to support the community. Thank you.